Hey guys, welcome in. Today we have a very special guest joining Go Lopes Radio. We have JY from the Big Mountain Podcast. JY, how are we doing today?
Oh, we're doing great. Lot to talk about with the Mountain West, and today was a big day for you Lope fans. So
Man,
I'm really excited.
I know, massive day, and we have a lot to get into. But first, I kind of want to talk a little bit about you and the work you do. Obviously, we've been kind of following you, especially over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months as things have really heated up. So, you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then the Big Mountain Podcast that you run, and then we got a lot to get into.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, JY here. I'm co-host of the Big Mountain. I am a fan of Western realignment, Western college football. Our pod is mostly football based, but as we're getting into a lot of the realignment, we've talked about the Big West, the Big Sky, the
Yeah,
WAC. Just really deep into kind of everything that's going on there. So sometimes it's football related, sometimes it's not. But I'm just really interested in the Pacific time, Mountain time zone schools, and kind of, I think, an area of the country that gets far too little attention. So I'm
for sure.
happy to try to give it a little more attention than maybe it usually gets. And on the Big Mountain, we started about 2 years ago. I'm the Mountain West guy. My co-host is a Big Ten guy. We've of course talked about the Pac from almost when they blew up here about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That was what kind of got us going on this realignment stuff, and it's been crazy for 2 years. I've really enjoyed it and gotten to meet some great people.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, thank you for joining us today. And I think for Lopes fans, this is a new world for us. Things like realignment, terms like billable hours. It's like, what the heck is going on here? And so I know a lot of us have kind of turned to you as our kind of source of information. So I think I've got a first question for you, and it's going to be a two-parter. First is, why do you think this is a good move for GCU? And then the second part is going to be, why is this a good move for the Mountain West to add GCU? Through both of those perspectives, I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, obviously in the short term, we're talking 25, 26. GCU needed a home. All you guys
Yeah.
know kind of what has occurred here recently, going out of the WAC, looking like you're going to the West Coast Conference, leaving to go to the
Yeah.
Mountain West Conference, and then you have a year where it's like both of those conferences aren't interested in you. And I was always kind of hopeful that this was going to work out, and I've kind of alluded to that over the last four,
Yeah.
5, 6 months. And I'm really glad that it did. I think it's a really nice ad for the Mountain West, and I think it's a good fit for GCU. Clearly, I mean, I just dropped a pod on our channel talking about GCU. What they've done over the 12 years here in
Yeah. It's
Division
incredible.
One. Incredibly fantastic resume that they've had. So to me, GCU's ready for that next level. They're ready to take that next step. I think the fit with the Mountain West is great. And I think it's just elevating the programs. I mean, people already know about Grand Canyon University one way or
Hmm.
another. They know the Lopes. I mean, the Havocs maybe people are aware of, and the craziness that you guys have going on in your home court. But I just think this further elevates that national branding of GCU. Going into one of the G6 conferences here. So I think that's a huge win for GCU. It certainly keeps them in the Western footprint,
Yeah.
which is important. I'm sure that
Yeah.
AD Boggs was very cautious about travel and all of that right now with
Hmm.
where things are at. So again, I think that's a lot of the positives from the GCU side. Of course, you're entering a really strong basketball conference for 25,
Yeah.
26.
Seriously.
That'll change a bit in 26, 27, but I think that's part of why it benefits the Mountain West. So I talked about GCU. I think this is a fantastic basketball ad for the Mountain West. They're losing some of their big brands, the San Diego States, the Boise States.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great call to backfill if you want, but clearly GCU's ready for that elevation. So I think this is a fantastic ad for them. I also love the fact the Mountain West is finally in the state of Arizona.
Yeah. Seriously.
Phoenix is,
Massive. It's growing.
yes, massively growing. There's only a few football programs that they could potentially even add in the state. So I
Yeah.
think like this is a huge win for the Mountain West. It gets them a whole new demographic, whole new set of eyes on the conference. So and I really think the elevation in basketball here with GCU not having football, and I've heard AD Boggs talk about this several times and a lot pretty recently here at the NACTA convention. This revenue share that we're heading into, GCU's gonna, I'm sure, gonna fund that pretty
Yeah,
strongly, and there's not a football program to fund. So
exactly.
your top two programs are the men's and women's basketball. So I'm really anxious to see this kind of new environment, how quickly the Lopes are going to continue to ascend. I like using the Mountain West verbiage,
Yep.
but
Yeah,
joining the
absolutely.
ascent, continuing to ascend. So, and I just got to give another shout out to AD Boggs and the leadership there at GCU. That's super important. Been very impressed with her. Talked to her once. We're planning another scheduled discussion with her here in a couple weeks. So I think that's a lot of the wins for the Mountain West. Again, a really good pairing here for both parties.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about that, and I think the first thing I think of is almost this like clarity, GCU with who they are and the direction they're going, what they want to do. And I think it makes it a lot easier if you're a conference, hey, these guys don't want to start football in 3 years and then get in the mix here. And or it's like, hey, we want to be really, really great at men's basketball. We are all in. We prioritize women's basketball as well. And they've been very successful in the other or Olympic sports, and they bring that to the table as well. And so there's like this clarity with who GCU wants to be that I think, probably played into the decision. Only one of these programs that's coming to join the New Mountain West was able to come in early, and that or was invited to come in early as an option, I guess, and then obviously formally today announced. So I think there's a reason for that. And I guess one thing I'm curious about, this mediation has been going on. I believe they said May 19th was the day it started. Obviously, probably even going on a little bit before, just in general, from people chest moves, all that sort of stuff. Are you maybe surprised by the timing of this announcement, considering there hasn't really been any information that's come from that mediation settlement from anyone involved in the mediation settlement on either side? Is this kind of a shock to you, maybe, that this seems to be leaked? We don't know that for, but seems to be leaked today.
I'm not overly surprised. I was always really conscious of and was watching when the Mountain West 5 departing members were going to give their actual written notice and their
Mm-hmm.
$5,000 payment to the Mountain West. That happened, I think it was on June 29th. And their deadline was on or before midnight of June 30th. So that really, what that did, that triggered those universities, those institutions being kind of pulled out of the voting pot of the Mountain West and
Uh,
moved into this interim period. And I won't get into the boringness of that, other than to say it's spelled out in their bylaws. And when they move into this interim period, that being the announcement of withdrawal date until the actual withdrawal date, they don't have voting rights at that point. They don't really have managerial rights at that point. They're
mm-hmm.
just members of the conference continuing to play the scheduled games, and the revenue sharing happens and all that kind of stuff, but they lose all managerial rights and voting rights. So that was the big date I was looking for. I probably incorrectly assumed this was all teed up and ready to go like the
Yeah.
next day, which clearly we're only 8 days or 9 days after that happened. I think that was the trigger point. Clearly it'll take some time for then the Mountain West 7 that we're sticking around to have those meetings, to take those votes, to have an agreement, for it to go back to GCU and get signed and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's why we are where we are. I did kind of wonder if this wasn't tied to mediation in one way, because Gloria
Mm-hmm.
Nevarez has always talked about a global resolution where they're looking at everything. So I thought maybe this was still going to happen, but maybe it was just going to be a part of mediation, especially since July 15th is right now the
Yeah.
deadline
It's
for the
close too.
mediation. So I kind of was like, I could see it going either way. We're talking 2 weeks. So, I wasn't really sure. So to me, the biggest factor was that those 5 departing members couldn't vote anymore to hold this up, which I believe they would have. And
Oh,
that's why
absolutely.
this
I
is,
think so. Based
yeah,
on some
that's why it's
statements I
happening
think
now.
we saw today. Yeah, which
Right.
again we don't need to get into, but it definitely
Yes,
seems
right.
like it would have been a different conversation.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and I think specifically speaking to GCU, I'm curious. This mediation obviously is continuing. How I think prior to this, a lot of it's centered around football. Those schools leaving. And just to clarify for the listeners, we have Fresno State, Utah State, Colorado State. Um, oh my gosh, why is my mind blanking right now? We're on the
Bo-
call. San
Boise and
Diego
San
State
Diego. Yep.
and Boise State are
Yep.
leaving to join the Pac-12 in 2026, 2027 for that season. Um, and how does this affect mediation? Because again, it's centered around football and kind of those bigger schools, and now all of a sudden, this agenda item seems to be the newsy item and seems to have ruffled some feathers.
Yeah.
So, how does this now fit into those mediation conversations? And I think maybe not the macro mediation conversation, but how it pertains and could affect GCU potentially in the short and then maybe long term.
Well, I don't think it'll affect GCU at all, and it shouldn't affect GCU at all. So I don't see that being an issue for the Lopes, whether it's this year or into the future with the Mountain West. It's really a non-issue, and as I said, this interim period. I know some of the statements that were made, but it's very clear, who has
Yeah,
control right now of the Mountain West and what they can do. So I don't see this being negative to GCU by any stretch of the imagination. The litigation and the mediation, do they bring it up? Maybe. Again, I don't think macro level this is really going to change much, if anything, of that either. I think there's optics that need to be had. There's,
sure.
uh, you
Yep.
know, kind of
Posturing
chest,
and yep.
posturing, puffing out your chest, that kind of thing.
Sure.
I think that's what you're seeing now. I wouldn't put a lot of stock into really any of that or the mediation when it comes to GCU.
Sure. And I know you mentioned you have a heavier focus on football, but you did mention Mountain West. I consider myself a massive basketball fan. Mountain West, really, really good basketball conference. And so I'm curious, obviously there's two stages to this, right? There's the 1 year with everyone and then the schools leave. But I guess just thinking for the 1 year next year, I mean, how impressive is it? I mean, even if I would have told you 2 years ago, hey, one team is going to sneak into this giant Mountain West somehow for one last year. I mean, how wild of an idea is that? Because I think in GCU land, it's like maybe we don't understand just how fortunate of an opportunity this is to get to play really, really freaking good basketball schools.
Huge opportunity for GCU. Again, back 6 months ago or whenever it was, and this first came up, I was thinking, what an awesome 25-26 basketball season the
Yeah.
Mountain West could have if they add the Lopes to this, this whole membership. And it's going to happen. I think it's going to be great. You look at some of these schools, and they kind of have complained somewhat about the 20 game in conference
Yeah.
schedule that the Mountain West has. But adding GCU here, okay, they're not going to be number one, right? But they're a strong basketball program that really is just going to elevate the Mountain West. 2 years ago, they took 7 to the NCAA tournament. So
Yeah.
seeing those types of numbers going to the tournament isn't abnormal for the Mountain West. So if I'm a basketball fan of any of the universities within the Mountain West, I'm loving this ad because it just further builds
Yep.
up the membership and the competitiveness, the net rankings, and go on and on and on. You want strength of schedules. This is giving you a harder strength of schedule. Figure it out on the basketball court. And I'm just so happy that we're going to get this for a year. And as a Mountain West guy that started this pod way before any of this craziness, you just sit back and go, oh my, what could have been, right? Like, oh, it's great we
Mm-hmm.
get it for 1 year. I wish we could have it for the next 7 years, but it is what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it is interesting. You think about the venue, obviously, GCU Arena, the Havocs, throwing that in the mix. I think we're gonna have some really good games. Obviously, it sounds like based on the conference scheduling, the teams, not everyone's going to go to every venue, so we'll kind of see how that eventually shakes out. Obviously, waiting on some schedules for, we'll call them the Olympic other sports,
Right.
especially the fall ones. So we'll kind of see as that happens. But yeah, massive, massive get, I think, for the Lopes. So let's now talk about the Mountain West past this next first year.
Mhm.
I guess a lot of this, right, is how does GCU fit into that new power structure? We mentioned only GCU was invited to join the conference early. A few other members are going to be joining after this season. So if you just had to guess, I guess a two-part question. One, what are you kind of seeing for that media deal down the road? You've been talking about a little bit for the new Mountain West. And then how do you see GCU fitting into that? We saw Gonzaga go to the Pac-12, and all of a sudden it's reported they're getting a full share.
Yeah.
Is that something you could maybe see happening for the Lopes, or how do you see that power structure kind of playing out?
Yeah, good question. I'll just first say this is pure speculation on my part.
Yeah.
I don't have any inside information on any of this, but I've put the range for the Mountain West, full member, all in, football, everything, 4 to 6 million per year media distribution. Now, that's not full distribution from the conference, that's the media portion of the conference
Yep.
distribution. So I'm guessing 4 to 6 million for, again, full member. I would be surprised if GCU is getting that full membership without having football, because when
Yep.
we talk a lot about media value and who's driving media value. The 80-20 split seems to be pretty kind of across the board. Sometimes people
Yeah.
say 85-15 to some level. Now I will say, I think bringing in GCU, if the hope of the members and Commissioner Navarez is that GCU is going to be, not in 25-26, but in a few years, again, because of revenue share, because of your investing, because of all of that,
Hmm.
is going to be one of the front runners within the Mountain West, pulling in, units, tourney units. I could see them doing pretty well with the share that they do get. I really don't want to speculate. I don't want to throw out,
Yeah.
we
Totally.
followed Texas State a ton and the whole bowl of soup situation. I'm not getting into that with the Lopes. I have no
No.
idea
Yeah.
what it is. Eventually, we're going to find out.
Yeah.
I will only say I would be really surprised if GCU is getting a full share with the Mountain
Sure.
West. I'm sure it's going to be a partial, but I'm not going to throw a dart at this point and try to pick where that's at.
Yeah, and I think this is a little bit of a different world, right? And I wrote about this in my recent article. But GCU in the WAC, they were unquestionably the belle of the ball. They won 5 straight Commissioner Cups, which takes into account all of the sports. Obviously, men's basketball, they've dominated over the last 3 years, and so I think this will be a little bit of a change and an adjustment as GCU enters into the Mountain West. Obviously, this first year, right? They might be closer to the bottom of the totem pole. So kind of a little bit of a flip from where they were in the WAC. And then moving forward, I'm just kind of intrigued to see how that plays out, because football is king. You know that. You've talked about that on your show. Men's basketball is good and there's money to be made and there are eyeballs, but football is king. And so that'll be a big part of the Mountain West moving forward. So we'll see how that shakes out. As we always know, we can continue to follow the big mountain. We know you'll be all over that. So um, okay, I guess last thing I kind of want to ask you as you head out the door here, when you see this GCU come into the Mountain West, what were kind of your first impressions on a game with X school in the Mountain West? That's going to be really good. Like that's one I might have to go be in the arena for a potential rivalry that could happen. What kind of do you see being a school that GCU could really have that rivalry? Because GCU hasn't quite had that since New Mexico State left the WAC. Who do you
Yeah.
kind of see as that potential opportunity for those really good games?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two with an honorable mention.
Okay,
So my two, and they're probably not going to be surprising, but UNLV is being set up as kind of the leader of the new Mountain West. They're going to be getting
sure.
more money out of the settlement whenever that
Everyone wants
actually
Vegas
arrives.
involved. That's they're the new,
Exactly.
yeah,
So, if we can get the Havocs into, up there with the Rebels and vice versa, that would be a really great environment for both sides. So I've got to throw UNLV out there. Their basketball program, a little bit ups and downs, not downs like in the
sure.
bottom, but a little ups
But
and
they've
downs.
invested, and that they've kind of almost drawn a line in the sand. They've
Yeah.
invested in Passner, I think, bringing a little bit of energy, some money, and then I did see they brought back an assistant coach who I believe used to play under the program. That's been a massive hit with the fan base. I think it's kind of maybe a turning of the page to your point.
Yeah, I think UNLV's absolutely, they have, they've seen the writing on the wall. They know where they need to go, and they are all into it, and they're all into the Mountain West. So I think, fortunately, we're going to actually get a tour of their facilities here next week when we're out in Vegas for the
Yeah,
Mountain West Media
awesome.
Days. So I'm anxious to see all of that stuff. UNLV's there. And of course, I'm going to have to bring up New Mexico as my
Absolutely.
1B. They're just an elite program within the Mountain West. Of course, losing Coach Petito it hurts them, but they've
Sure.
got the Pit. I mean, the Pit is just well known. The
Incredible.
Havocs move into the Pit, and the Lobos fans move into over to GCU, and the proximity there. I just think UNM is probably number one,
Yeah.
honestly. And I think there's some great potential there for those two. We just had AD Lovo on. I actually brought up
Yes.
to
Listen to a little
him
bit of that.
the
Yep.
GCU. Hey, this could be something good here. So UTEP would be interesting. They have it more investing to do. They kind of
Mhm.
got to get their program kind of going again. So that's not my honorable mention, but I got to bring up the Miners. I'm a big advocate for the Miners. I think they're a good ad too. I would say my honorable mention maybe is Hawaii. And it's a school that
Interesting.
doesn't get talked about a whole lot with the Mountain
Okay.
West because yeah, they've been a football member for a while, but they've been with the Big West for a while. They now have a new AD. They're going to be full members within the Mountain West. They do bring market share and media value to the Mountain West. You might be like, what the heck does Phoenix, Arizona, and Honolulu, Hawaii have anything to do with each other? Well, I could see those two programs potentially kind of rising together, and as they
Yeah.
rise together, kind of creating. Again, you're not going to drive to Hawaii, obviously, but I think as you have two up and coming potential programs, you can see them at least on the court being potential rivals here within, again, not next year, but maybe we're talking 2, 3, 4 years from now. So honorable mention to the Rainbow Warriors out there.
Yeah, and I think to kind of wrap this up here, I think one thing that's leaves me really, really excited is one, you talked about wanting the Mountain West to be in Arizona, probably specifically Phoenix, right? Phoenix is growing.
Yeah.
We have so many transplants. We have people from kind of all over the nation, especially on the West Coast. A lot of people who will be New Mexico fans who probably live here, who are Nevada fans, who are from Vegas. It's going to be not even Hawaii. You mentioned Hawaii, right? A lot of people who have relocated here, and so I think there could be a potential for a lot of people to attend games at GCU, and so I get pretty excited about that. And then the second part, one of the bummers about the WAC is there's a lot of small towns. The travel's not easy if you're a GCU fan
Right.
and you want to go. That's just how it was happenstance. You look at some of these teams. I mean, what for the first year you got, really easy travel that I
Yes.
think a lot of GCU fans could get to. And then even moving forward, I mean, El Paso's close, ton of flights. Obviously you mentioned Albuquerque, Vegas,
Yeah.
and so I think there's a lot of potential here to kind of have it go both ways, where there's going to be really, really good environments. I think really good rivalries happening. And then at the end of the day, right, you look at the staffs, they're probably going to be recruiting the same kids, right? High school,
Yeah.
everyone wants Southern California,
Yeah.
Phoenix. They have a lot of basketball recruits, and those guys, yes, they do leave, and you want to get guys in the portal, but a lot of those guys will come from from their high school days in Southern California, and so I think going to be some interesting recruiting wars, I think, as well as some really good games. So,
Yeah.
well, hey, that is it for today. We're super thankful to have you join us. I know amidst a crazy, crazy time in all of West Coast realignment, and so I really, really appreciate you. And can you tell the listeners where we can find you if we want to tune into some of your content?
Yeah, just the Big Mountain Podcast on YouTube. That is the only place we are right now. But I also tweet quite a bit on X, so it's at TBM_JY. I'm kind of all over the place. We were talking before we were recorded. It's pretty hot and heavy right now. I'm on probably more than I should be, but really appreciate those that follow us. We have a lot of good viewers and dwellers, as we call them, and it's a lot of fun. So.
And yeah, we got to get you a pack of Lopes Lager out there
There you go.
to
Yeah.
celebrate GCU. But yeah, to summarize this, Grand Canyon University will be joining the Mountain West Conference as a member for the upcoming season. Massive, massive news on the West Coast, and honestly, just college basketball and athletics in general. So massive, massive day. And JY, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you.
Hey, thank you so much for the invite. I'm always ready to talk Mountain West, and go Lopes.